Resilience is the ability to stay focused on the outcome and maintain momentum, even when things around you are changing. Welcome back to the Mike Method. I'm your host, Mike Desjardins. Today, I'm joined by Reese Haydon, Senior Director and Head of Executive Talent and Learning at PayPal, where he leads executive selection, onboarding, coaching, development, succession planning, and top team effectiveness for VP and higher leaders. Reese has spent more than a decade helping major organizations like PayPal, Salesforce, Dropbox, and Cisco connect leadership development directly to strategy and performance. In this conversation, we explore what leadership requires in a world where AI, fintech, and organizational change are accelerating all at once. Reese shares how PayPal is developing leaders around 4 core capabilities: investing in self and others, leading with clarity, impactful problem solving, and agile decision-making. We also unpack the difference between productive and destructive tension, why resilience starts with knowing when you're in the yellow before you hit the red, and why frameworks like DACY, the 5 Whys, and clear communication models can help leaders make better decisions, delegate more effectively, and keep their teams moving through ambiguity. Let's dive in. Reese, I appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's good to see you.
You too. Now, you're in a very interesting place in that you're currently with PayPal, you've got both the AI, which has taken off in the last number of years, and before that, fintech. And so now you're at the intersection of leaders in fintech, while we're also seeing AI just explode everywhere. And my curiosity for you is, as you look at the leaders within PayPal, I think a big part of the conversation is, what AI should I be using? What AI can I not use at work? How frequently am I using it? But I kind of want to flip the script on you and ask you the question, like, how is AI actually impacting the actual leaders themselves?
I think AI obviously is everywhere and it's changing so quickly. Every day we see new models released with new capabilities. They're capable of doing things that we're probably not even testing yet. So I try to pay attention to what some leading thinkers are putting out there from their own research and experimentation to understand what can AI actually do. But I think with all this change and transformation in the space, something that we pay attention to a lot at PayPal is how our leaders and teams are resilient in the face of change and massive upheaval in the AI landscape. Because, like I said, technologies are going to change. How it works inside organizations is going to be different tomorrow than it is today. And it can be a lot to keep up with, not even mentioning everything else happening in the world. I think resilience is just a huge topic for leadership. So some of the capabilities that we focus on kind of connect to resilience as an overarching outcome.
So there's been a lot of work put into resilience in the last number of years. I think when, Angela Duckworth brought out her book, Grit, was a great...
Yeah, we just had her come speak.
Oh, you did? Okay, great. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so my curiosity then for you, when you think about resilience in today's day and age, what's the definition, like when you use that word, what's your definition, I guess?
I'm just going to come up with it on the spot, so we'll see if it's a good one.
Okay.
I think resilience is the ability to be unaffected or minimally affected by what's happening around you and stay focused on the outcome and maintain momentum. And I think that's what a ton of organizations are asking their employees to do, like keep the pace, keep moving quickly. And that can get exhausting, especially when things are outside of your control. But being able to figure out how to focus on what you can control and continue pursuing the outcomes that you know are right.
What I find interesting about that definition is it's really talking about, you could say that about any fast moving change, right? AI just happens to be the thing that's putting pressure on right now. And I'm curious, when you think about that definition, what are the types of behaviors and strategies or even mindset that you've seen leaders adopt that have helped them to protect their resilience in a time where they've got to do their day-to-day job and run the business or their portion of the business? And then, if they're a more senior leader, think strategically. And at the same time, they've got to try to figure out how to not only adopt AI themselves, but think about how AI is impacting the strategy and how it's supposed to inform how their teams are showing up. It's a lot. And I'm curious what the mindset strategies and behaviors are that you've seen that leaders have been able to apply to support that resilience.
Well, there's one concept that actually I learned about last week at a conference I was attending on a panel. My leader actually brought this up from her own experience leading, and also as a marathon runner. The concept of productive tension versus destructive tension, and thinking about how we can apply that to how we lead our teams, how we lead organizations. When are we putting our teams into situations where they're able to spend time in productive tension, growing and learning and being challenged and delivering stronger outcomes versus stepping into a place where they're overextended, overwhelmed, overburdened in a more destructive space. So that's one concept that I think a lot of leaders should probably start considering more when they're thinking about scoping work for their team, setting direction, building strategies, and working towards the future. At PayPal, we also have 4 leadership capabilities that we try to develop for all of our leadership, especially senior leaders. First is around investing in self and others. So if you can put your own oxygen mask on first, you can do that for your teams as well. So how do you invest in yourself, the resilience, the wellness that you need to show up at your best every day? And then how do you create an environment where you're really becoming a talent magnet by investing in others in the organization, where you become known as that leader that people want to go work for to have a really powerful, meaningful career. There are 3 other capabilities we can talk about if you're curious, but I think that one's a really good one that connects to resilience.
Let's stay on resilience and then let's cover the other 3, because anybody who's listening is like, wait, what are the other 3? So let's definitely cover the other 3. But let's continue to talk about resilience. So I think what's interesting about your leaders speaking from a marathon perspective is a lesson that I learned recently, and it kind of hit me. And it was a question: do I rest when I'm in the yellow, or do I rest when I'm in the red? And my answer was emphatically in the red. And so that's kind of like a burnout recovery cycle. And that's not what resilience is meant to be. And what I learned from that is I needed to figure out what were the triggers that told me that I was in the yellow, so that I could catch myself. Is it a physical manifestation? Is it a mindset? Is it like, I'm tired? What is it that pops up for me, so that I could start thinking about, well, I'm yellow now, so I need to carve, even if it's like 15 minutes to go for a walk outside. Or for me, it's like, oh, I just have these 5 tasks I need to get done at the end of the day, but my brain feels like mush. And so instead of powering through those 5 tasks, I go, I'm yellow, it's 5:30. Maybe now is not the best time to spend another half an hour, which will definitely push me into the red, which means tonight when I go see my family, I'm basically trying to recover when instead I would like to be present for them. So that's what I've learned recently about resilience is just having to learn how to understand what my yellow looks like.
Yeah, understand what drains you, what gives you energy, how you can recharge so that you can be at your best in the moments where you need to. I think the family example is really relevant and true for a lot of people, where they give their all to work only to give very little when they come back home, and they just need to recharge and they're not at their best, or they're not present with their family when that is something that they care deeply about and want to. Yeah, I don't know.
4 years ago, my wife said to me at dinner one night, she said, I feel like right now the people that you talk to during the day get the best of you. And she's like, your daughter and I get what's left of you. And that was like, as a gut punch. And the next day I sat on it for 24 hours, came back and I said, you're 100% right. I'm going to track a score every day out of 10, where my energy's at the end of the day. And it has to be a 7 or 8 or above. And if it isn't, I need to look at my day and figure out what thing I shouldn't have done, or how I could have restructured my day to get my energy to a minimum of that level by the end of the day. And so I'm on day 1500. I've been tracking it every day. So I have a running tally of it, and I haven't missed a day tracking this in my journal. And where am I at right now? 47 days of tracking my energy end of day. And it's made a difference. It's funny, just the act of just picking a number. I didn't really have to even put any strategies into place. I just started tracking the number, and it was 5 was the number I started with pretty consistently. And I'm like, wow, that's terrible. So,
all right.
It's where
start somewhere.
Yeah, it was where I started from, right? So then I just kind of moved up from there.
Well, I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't have a very similar conversation with my partner at some point in my career. We're like, oh gosh, maybe that is true, that I'm not giving you the best version of me all the time. It's a good wake-up call, I think, for a lot of us. Something I am a big fan of is just designing my day for just how you're describing it, thinking about when I am at my best for certain types of tasks. When am I better at deep thinking? When do I want to be creative? When am I more productive responding to emails or to-do items or corresponding, checking things off? When do I need to take a break and go do something active to get more energy throughout the day? And I encourage my team to do the same, to design their days around the schedule that works best for them so they can be most effective. And it seems to be working.
So that concept globally is called time blocking. And it's a super valuable resilience strategy to protect your day. For you, when you do that, do you design, like, say, like, because it's Monday today when we're recording this, do you look at it day to day, or do you look at it in a week chunk and then try to schedule your week around very specific time blocks and energy? Or like, how do you do it?
So I'd try to do day to day, but with a lens for a week, like
Okay.
seeing where I'm spending my time. How much time am I in person in the office? How much time am I like I am today, working
Yeah.
from home, making sure I have the right balance?
One of the fun things I started doing with my time blocking is I have little emoticons that match up with the block. So if it's something to do with a podcast, there's an emoticon that goes with this. If it's growth focused, it has a little chart with an upwards line next to it. If it's a meeting, it's got a very specific little symbol to it. So that way, when I look at my calendar visually, I can kind of see where I have time blocked and whether or not I've actually put all the time blocks in. And I have them as a note in Apple Notes so that weekly I can kind of look at it and go, okay, well, these are the 5 time blocks that matter a lot to me. Where am I going to stick these? Because if I don't stick them in my calendar, invariably something else fills it, right? And then I just don't
Yeah,
ever get that productive thinking time.
I love that. Great practice. I do lots of color coding on my calendar. I don't have emojis, but similar.
Yeah.
So similar types of activities have different color codes, and you can do an inventory later looking back. How did you spend your time? Did you prioritize what you needed to? How are you feeling resilient? Yeah.
I think color coding is an expert level skill for calendar management. Like, you just nailed it.
Great.
It is like anybody that I know that color codes, they say the same thing. They're like, I can just look at my schedule and tell you whether or not my week's going to be good or bad relative to my color
Mhm.
coding. And I can look back in my calendar and tell you why I'm tired, because I can see literally just by looking at the colors that I've done too much of something or other, and it's like trash my resilience. I'm curious if we flip the script into talking about the other 3 PayPal leadership competencies that you focus on. What are the other 3?
Yeah, we call them capabilities. The other 3 are impactful problem solving,
Yep.
agile decision making, and leading with clarity. So all 4 of those are our strategy for helping leaders be really effective in the environment that we're in. Understanding there's so much change and transformation happening around us, we believe these are the 4 skills or capabilities they all need to be very good at to lead their organizations effectively and deliver results.
So we've talked about the first one, which is tied into resilience. Let's talk about
Mhm.
each of the other ones. So describe to me what the second one is.
We'll go with leading with clarity. So that one I think is more around how do you set expectations for your team that are really clear, especially again, when so much is changing, so much is unknown. There's a lot of ambiguity out there. What can you be really clear about with your team so that they know what's expected, what success looks like, where they should prioritize their time and attention? And how do you connect what your team is doing every day back to a larger purpose? I think that's another exercise that we go through. Another capability we try to build is helping leaders connect their team story back to PayPal's mission, right? How are we all revolutionizing commerce globally?
Right.
It could be harder for a team like mine and executive talent and learning because we're not touching directly the product. But if we think about our customers internally, we're helping our executives be more effective, which then should immediately impact the product and impact our customer experience.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to think about clarity. I know there's one thing we've run into with leaders is they'll say to us, well, but I don't have all the answers. And so they like wait till I've got as much information as I can and then I share it. And the feedback we give leaders, well, the problem with that is that people then make stuff up because there's a vacuum there. And so then they fill it with their own narrative. And instead, what we've seen valuable is say, I know these things and I have clarity around these things. I don't have answers to these questions yet. I just don't. And as soon as I do, I'll fill it in for you. And even that differentiation between what I have clarity on and what I don't will, one, provide people a little bit more sense of certainty, right? Which really does support people feeling like they have more control. And then secondarily, they're like, okay, you don't know the answer to these questions, which is okay, but when you do, you'll bring them to us. So then I don't have to think about this anymore because you're responsible for bringing it to me. And that level of clarity from leaders is, I think, the difference between I'll communicate when I have full certainty and I'll communicate what I have clarity on and what I don't.
I love that. It reminds me of something I learned from a peer of mine. She tells this story often when we're talking about how do we share this information with employees or what can we share. She shared that in her past experience, she had a leader that she really liked who would say one of 3 things, like, I know and I can tell you. I don't know and I can't tell you. Right. Or I do know and I can't tell you. Here's what I can tell you. So that level of clarity, I think, is really helpful for teams because in the absence of information, we make up our own stories, and often those stories are worse than the reality.
What I love about that is I think that's a great 2x2 matrix that you just described. That's like a really simple graph or a 2x2 matrix, sorry, that we could create for leaders from a communication perspective. So I've never heard it described that way before. That's excellent.
Yeah, super simple, works really well.
Yeah. I'm big on anything that can be turned into a simple mantra or simple thing that a leader, like I can, it's really hard to forget that. And I could show somebody else this because I just draw a box and here's what I know, here's what I don't know, here's what I can tell you, and here's what I can't tell you. And we're talking about this box right here. I know, and I can't tell you.
Right. I can tell you these
Yes.
things. Yes. Give them something. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the other two, or sorry, they're not competencies. The other two
Capabilities. Call them what you want.
Yeah.
Another one that I like, impactful problem solving. We have 4 different sort of frames that we'll teach people, or mindsets that we teach people in that one, to make sure that they're focusing on the correct problem or solving a problem that has big impact for the company. I'll tell you 3 of those frames because I don't remember the 4th one right now.
Sure.
But the first one is thinking end game. Yeah. So how do we think about, like, where do we want to be when this is over? What's the actual outcome that we're after from this decision or this problem that we're working on? Don't think about all. It's easy to get caught up on all the little steps between where you are today and where you need to go. Yeah. But thinking end game about the ultimate decision or outcome. Flip the frame is another really good one. Like, how would another party or another person or participant think about this problem? I'm thinking about it from my lens in HR. How do I flip this frame from another stakeholder's perspective and try to see the problem in a different way? And then a third is stating the brutal facts. I think it's something that we have to practice all the time. Just lay it all out there. Speak candidly, because if you have all of the information on the table, then you can do something with it. If you're shying about it or withholding information, or there's not enough psychological safety, it's really hard to solve the correct problem because you don't have all the information that you need.
I love that, because I think, okay, for number one of the things we see, particularly with problem solving, is a lot of solution focused around symptoms. And so leaders are out there trying to play whack-a-mole with symptoms.
Exactly.
And if they haven't spent the time to get clear on what the root cause is, then all they're going to do is continue to play whack-a-mole. But if they step back and they talk with the team and say, like, why does this keep happening? What's the root cause of this? Let's go fix that. Because if we just fix it once for this one customer or this one situation, it's going to happen again.
Completely. I've seen it time and again in other companies. And it's unfortunate when you can't zoom out and think about the bigger picture or the bigger problem, the system that you need to solve. You're only addressing the symptom. The symptoms never really go away.
And the second one is great because the flip the script is actually helping to build one of the areas of emotional intelligence, which is empathy. And so, we all have our filters and our worldviews. And if you can put yourself in the frame of another person tackling a problem, 1, you build empathy, but 2, you actually build self-awareness. One is the same area of the brain. So you're exercising the same area of your brain when you do it, but you build self-awareness. And how you build self-awareness is, my worldview and how I see this problem is not the only way to look at this. Then from an empathy perspective, there are people that may be closer to the facts than me that have less opinion about this and more factual information that would help me to be able to make a better decision. It also makes me think about, maybe I'm not the only stakeholder, or maybe we're not the only stakeholders in this. Maybe there's some other stakeholders that we could bring in that would help us to make this decision. And your third one about confronting the brutal facts, actually, it's called the Stockdale paradox that comes from Good to Great. And it talks about confronting the brutal facts. And the second portion of that is move forward with positive intent anyway. And the wonderful thing about that is this is really hard. We have to figure this out. So let's just confront the brutal facts of the situation, and then let's figure out how to move forward with positive intent in spite of those facts being true today.
I love that. I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll become a 5th model in that training. Thank you.
So that's great. I appreciate you sharing the capabilities that you're looking for from leaders in your organization. I think what's interesting is, sometimes people will ask us, like, what's the perfect leadership model that all leaders should espouse to? And I'm like, there's so many capabilities, competencies, and frameworks out there that I don't believe that there's the perfect thing for all leaders. And I do believe that for certain seasons, within a business's growth cycle, there are specific capabilities which will help to move leaders forward and help them to execute on the current strategy of the organization. And what I hear you describing is very clearly narrowing down to four, which is easy for people to remember and easy for them to then hold people accountable for, that report to them, hold themselves accountable for. And it doesn't overwhelm their subconscious with trying to remember some giant leadership capability model, which they aren't going to remember and would have to refer to constantly. And that doesn't really work.
It doesn't. If they don't remember it, if it doesn't stick, it's not going to work. And I think, fortunately or unfortunately, people like me in positions like mine tend to get fascinated with or just love talking about like the big, cool, complicated theory, framework, model, whatever it is, making something really what we consider fancy or flashy for the organization. But if the organization is not ready for it, or it's not meeting their need, it's not going to work. And so what I really like about the model that PayPal has used is it's simple. To your point, it is our hypothesis for what the organization needs right now for some key capabilities that'll help us be more effective in the future. I think largely for leadership, agility is a big one. And it's kind of built into everything that I just shared, but staying agile connects directly to being resilient because things are always going to change. Your decision you made yesterday is probably going to feel different tomorrow because you got new information. So how do you take that and keep moving in the right direction rather than getting tripped up by it? I think if there's anything out there for leaders to practice, it's agility. I agree with you. There's not one best playbook or framework or model or really cool idea that's going to be the panacea for all leadership problems. It doesn't exist.
It's interesting to bring up agility as the fourth capability, because I think for a long time we were focused on IQ for leaders. Then we started to focus in 1998 after that original work that the book that Goleman came out with, Working with Emotional Intelligence. Then it became about EQ, and EQ carried us through really to the pretty much still the modern day. The difference, of course, between IQ and EQ being that we don't really our IQ doesn't really grow as we age. Our experiences grow, and if we're reflecting on them, we become wiser, but our actual IQ can only go up max 11 points through our lifetime. Whereas EQ is something we can absolutely grow throughout our lifetime. We can continue to improve on all the areas of emotional intelligence. And when you bring up agility, it makes me think about the third one, which is the AQ, which is the adaptability quotient, which is effectively the same thing. Like they're synonymous terms, the way you're describing agility, which is how adaptable am I to a changing scenario where as the facts and reality shifts, I'm able to shift my viewpoint, my mindset, and my behaviors to match the current reality, which is effectively what I heard you just say with your definition of agility. And it's a pretty critical skill. I'd say like when the pandemic hit, it became probably one of the most important skills through that period of time. And then it just hasn't gone away. And then when AI picked up, as we talked about earlier in the podcast, it got doubled down on, where it's like, okay, if you thought we were progressing at a rapid rate before, now look what's happening. We're feeling like we're in this exponential curve of this shift that AI is bringing into all of our world daily, whether we want it or not. It's here and it's happening. And I feel like that skill of agility as that last skill is critical, because if you don't have it, it dramatically affects the first skill that we talked about, which is your resilience. If you don't have that agility, then effectively you say, I'm going to fight reality and win. And that's exhausting and also impossible, because it's effectively like going to the ocean and deciding to hold the tide back with your hands, right?
Good luck.
Yeah, it's not going to work, right? And so to be able to protect your resiliency, that agility needs to be in place, or your people get really stuck. If we were talking about it from a change curve perspective, they would get stuck in the denial phase, where they're like, don't like it, don't want to change with it, so I'm just going to stay the same. But the tension that they create inside themselves is something that their subconscious is absolutely aware of, even if they're not consciously aware of it. What's your take?
If you want to, I agree with you. And if you wanted to apply another leadership framework to that, you can think about growth mindset and fixed mindset, right? From Carol Dweck. And that's the whole agility concept in action. Like if we can remain agile in our own thinking and our own mental models that we apply to the world and the work that we do, then I think we can stay relevant, we can stay effective. If we get stuck in one point of view and think that no, my way is the right way,
Yeah.
it's not gonna it's not always gonna work out.
How, when you think about growth mindset, because I know the term's used a lot in leadership today, how do you define growth mindset? And if you were watching a leader do growth mindset, what would be the types of things that would be so obvious that they're doing that, oh, that person's got a growth mindset?
Another moment where I'm going to be tested to see if my on the spot definitions are good. Let's
Well, it's your
think.
lived
What's a
experience,
definition
right?
of a
Like,
growth mindset?
yeah.
I hope Carol doesn't listen and then correct me later, but or maybe she will and she'll love it. I think a growth mindset is just seeing yourself as capable of learning and solving new challenges that you haven't experienced before. And how I would find that out in the wild is witnessing a leader stepping into a new situation that they haven't done before, exercising a ton of curiosity, listening, trying to understand the situation, and then operating with confidence for where they think they need to go. I think that's a good model, but then also remaining really flexible as they get new information, because I think that's the biggest thing that we all have to practice because we get new information all the time. Adapting our approach and understanding this didn't work. I'm going to try this new approach now and see if this works better for me, and continuing to hone it until you get to the outcome that you need.
The flexibility of approach, how I first learned that, which really stuck with me, was have strong beliefs loosely held.
Yeah, I love that one.
And I think that's a great definition of growth mindset. I feel like leaders who understand that the job of learning and growth of how I show up as a leader and basically also how I show up as a human being is a lifelong thing. It's like if you look at the works of the Stoics and the Stoicism work, for anybody that likes to follow that, there's no end goal, like there's no end state. It is a constant pattern of experiencing and reflecting, and learning and experiencing and reflecting. And so it's this circular pattern where the reflection is what creates the learning, and then I'm going to go have a new experience, which then I need to reflect on, and that's when I'm going to get the learning. And that pattern for a leader never ends. And so the thought of I've reached the pinnacle of my leadership in my life is really a deathbed without being morbid, it's a deathbed conversation, right? Like I have been in this space for 25 years now, and I'm still learning all the time and shifting my perspective and my view because I get new information. And then I think, yeah, the world's changed. So what I used to believe was true for a while, just isn't true anymore. I need to learn how to show up differently based on this new fact pattern that exists out in the world.
Absolutely. It reminds me of the blind man and the elephant. I'm sure you know that one. Yeah.
Depending on which part of the elephant the blind man is touching, there's a very different experience of what they think an elephant looks like. Yeah.
It's just more about gaining more information and then learning and filling in the gaps for your reality and going with it as you build.
So as you look into the future and you forecast ahead, thinking about how leaders are using those capabilities at PayPal and demonstrating them to their teams on a regular basis, because obviously the more they model it, the better chance there is of the people that are reporting up to them like seeing physical manifestation of it. They can see their leader doing it, they can see what it looks like done well. What are the types of reinforcing behaviors, and you can take this anywhere you want to go with it, but like what are the types of reinforcing behaviors that you've seen from leaders that really help to ground them in the practical day-to-day of applying these types of skill sets?
One of the concepts we teach is just getting people familiar with DAISY as a decision-making framework or a model, because I think a lot of organizations have taught DAISY or another version of it, but we want something consistent so that we have a unified vocabulary and framework for it internally so we know how we're making decisions. And so one really easy way of reinforcing is just when leaders ask their teams, okay, is there a for this initiative, for this project that we're running? Like, did you go through the process of figuring out like who's driving this? Am I the approver or are you the approver? Who's contributing? Who needs to be informed? So I think just asking the questions once we've introduced the model holds people accountable to demonstrating the behavior that we believe will be more effective for them. So that's one really easy one.
And for those of you who haven't heard of the DAISY, I think a lot of people have heard of the RACI framework. So the DAISY framework, close, DACI, has basically 4 four components to it. So one is who's the driver that's managing the process, who's the approval, so the person that has the ability and the authority to make the final decision, who are contributors, so they will provide, like sometimes they're external experts, they provide input, recommendations, and technical knowledge. So they have a voice in the process, but they're not actually the approver. And then who is informed? So who needs to be kept up to speed? They aren't influencing the decision, they aren't making the decision, but they are impacted by the decision that's being made.
That's exactly right. And I misspoke when I mentioned it. We use DAISY, the formal framework for decisions. DAISY is for decisions. We use DAISY Lite, where we still use those same roles for projects, initiatives, other things that aren't decisions, but we use the language.
Yeah. One of the things we find that's fascinating with leaders is that as they grow in their tenure in an organization, but hierarchically, one of the things they look forward to is having the responsibility and authority for decisions. And they think, oh, now I can finally move things along quickly because I will be the person making the decision. And what they find really quickly is they're like, except I have to consult so many different people in the organization to get a decision done. Whereas before, I thought when I got to that position, it'd be easy. I could just like snap my fingers, make a decision and move on. But all of a sudden they realize they now have this greater responsibility to demonstrate really good decision-making or really good project management, which is a discipline and actually takes more time, but it's better than having to go back and fix bad decisions. So if it's a light decision and it needs to be made quickly, then sure, maybe you have the authority to do it. But for every other decision, using a proper framework that involves the stakeholders that are engaged in the conversation, that need to be informed, ensuring it's clear who has authority to make that decision, is critical to it actually being a great decision. We did this thing with one of our clients, and they'd had a series of decisions that had not worked out well in the organization. And so we said, well, and they were big at the ELT level. So let's just write them all out. Let's just write, there's 5 of them. So like the 3 that worked and the 2 that didn't, let's just figure out why the 2 that didn't work and why the 3 that worked. And let's just map this out. And at the end of the day, we ended up having a decision-making model for them. And they realized that a lack of rigor in decision-making was the only reason that the decision didn't work. And for the decisions that did work, it was the usage of rigor, but it wasn't in a structured way. It just happened to have been done properly. And so now, one of the critical skills that we teach leaders across that whole organization, they call it an empowerment framework, but it's actually a decision-making model, is this framework. But there's these great examples that go along with it. It's like, we didn't use this in the past, and these are the bad things that happened, and they were expensive. When we did use them, these are the good things that happened. And so the CEOs spent the last year saying that the number one skill he wanted to see in the organization as they continued to grow was proof that effective decision-making was happening by people demonstrating that they were using the model. That's a pretty bold statement for a CEO that in a fast growth company to say that was the number one thing that he wanted to see from leaders. He didn't even have 4. It was the one that mattered most to them at that time.
That's a bold statement.
It is, right?
Is it working?
That's what I think, to your point, right? Like PayPal's, you've got those 4 things, whether it's 4, it's 2, it's 1. The point is that if you can figure out what's holding back execution in the organization, what's holding back the organization from moving towards its strategy, it's not usually 20 things, right? Like it isn't this like large group of things. You got to try to fix all of them. There's usually some high leverage things that need to shift. And what's your take on that? What's been yours?
I completely agree. I think that is a common experience in a lot of companies, especially ones I've been in, where decisions get stalled because nobody knows who is able to make the decision or who needs to be involved, or nobody wants to make the decision. They're waiting for somebody else to. So that's why we're teaching this as a tool for leaders to be really clear about what decisions they can make, with which people informed or aligned, and which decisions need to go to a different level.
It's interesting when leaders get into a place of recognizing they have too much on their plate, and they say, well, I'm going to delegate this to my team. And they basically hand over the decision. And if there's no decision-making framework in place, then effectively you're saying, you group of people who haven't had responsibility for this decision before in the past, who've never made a decision like this as a group, go try to figure it out. And effectively becomes a consensus decision. Whether that doesn't mean it's the right decision. It just means that most of the people think that's the right thing to do. And then leaders get frustrated because they're like, we're not doing that. So then they step in and they change the decision. So now you've got a leader who's frustrated because they're like, I gave this to you and then you screwed it up. And then you've got a
Mm-hmm.
group of people saying, well, you gave it to us, we made a recommendation and now you changed it anyway. So why are we even bothering? And so now they're kind of stuck in this like catch 22, like whose fault is it? And we push back on the leaders and say there wasn't a framework in place and you kind of abdicated the decision. Where what could have happened is instead you could have coached them through the decision, walked them through a decision making framework, help them with how you would decide that, so that in the future you will be able to hand a decision like that over to them. But you can't just delegate things to a group of people if they've never done them before. In one
Mm-hmm.
case, it was a Christmas party or a holiday party, and the ELT had always done it. And then they said, well, we're going to give it to the OLT, the next level of leaders. And it came back and they're like, yeah, we don't like any of it. So the ELT took it over and redid the whole thing. And they said, oh, it was too early for us to give them this responsibility. And our response was, it wasn't too early for you to give them the responsibility. It was too early for you to abdicate responsibility for this. It was an appropriate time for them to collaborate with you on building the holiday party so they could see your thought process, because many of you have been in this organization and had responsibility for this massive holiday party for 25 years. The minimum was 15. They've had zero responsibility for it and really just been invited to it and seen it. And so next year, the plan is that the ELT and OLT are going to collaborate together on building out the holiday party. And so they can make the decisions, they can understand the framework. Then the year after, the OLT will have responsibility for delivering on it, but the approval will still be with the ELT, but they'll have the experience of having worked through how decisions were made around a holiday party. Sounds like something really simple, but it caused a lot of chaos in the organization during a very busy time when the ELT had to step in to take over a holiday party.
Tons of chaos, and think about just the organizational cost, right? Too, when you have people that you've empowered to go make a decision that you immediately untangle or disempower once they give it to you, then it's a waste of their time. They don't feel valued. What's the effort worth if it's not going to actually be used? So you don't want to create a culture like that.
This was the 23 most senior people, most highest paid people in the
Right.
organization involved in this thing I just described to you. So, but this is like, I don't blame the ELT for this. They had great intentions. They're like, hey, this would be a good thing for us to hand over. We probably shouldn't be doing the holiday party when we're fast growing company expanding at the rate that we are. We should probably be spending time on other strategic priorities. So the concept of delegating was the right decision.
Yes.
It's just how the decision making was supported moving forward.
It didn't set the OLT up for success, it sounds like.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Anytime we delegate something, we have the responsibility to set up that, as you say, to set up that next level of leader, even if it's a direct report, for success. And as a leader, the more things I can support the successful delegation of, the more I free up white space for strategic time, for culture, for, in my role, for large scale business development, so partnerships and things like that. And I can add way more value if I spend my time in those three areas than I can in the other areas. And then I've also created a developmental opportunity for somebody that reports to me, because this was something I was holding on to that they are now responsible for. But it isn't like I do it, you do it. I would say it's like a dimmer switch. So if it's all me with the decision and zero involvement, you don't flip the switch the other side. You take a dimmer switch and you go, well, I'm going to show you how to do it with me. Then I'm going to, next year, you're going to do it with my support while I watch and coach you. And then the year after that, then we'll have you do it and I will be here to support you, but really you're going to be responsible for it. And by using that dimmer switch, now this is an example of something that happens annually, but there's lots of examples of things that happen weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, where in a very short space of time, you can kind of like turn that leadership dial or dimmer switch over and then eventually have delegated something to someone in a way that sets them up for success. And then at the same time, really frees you up as a leader to have more time in the things you have high leverage on.
I love that. It's another good mental model or tool to apply, using the dimmer switch instead of the regular flip switch.
What's your mental model that you kind of hold day to day, or models, you might have a couple of them, that are kind of like frameworks that you've learned in your leadership career where you say to yourself, I love this because it's easy to remember and I use it all the time?
Really like the 5 whys, which is again around root cause. Well, it's just trying to figure out like your addressing a problem, or you have a situation that's presenting itself. You found out some situation's happening, some symptom, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
And then you just have to ask a series of why questions. So, okay, we didn't hit our numbers this quarter. Why was that? Okay, well, we didn't have a good product market fit because we hadn't really understood our customer pain points. Why not? And then keep going deeper until you get to the actual root cause of the problem that you need to address. So I try to think about that when I'm presented with like, oh, we've got this big problem. Try to understand what's actually behind it so we can solve the right problem. To your earlier point, solving the problem, not just the symptoms.
What I love about that model, that's originally developed by Toyota in their lean philosophy. And what I love about that 5 whys model is it ties directly into one of the capabilities at PayPal, which is figure out what the actual problem is. And if you
Impactful problem solving.
yeah, like exactly as you described before, is one of the capabilities. If you're able to narrow down to what the actual issue is, and what the whys do is they break through all the symptoms and they get you down to root cause. That's a fantastic model. I love that you brought that up. Reese, it's been an absolute pleasure to be in conversation with you today. I really appreciate you making time to share the models that you're using at PayPal right now, but also you've been in leadership development for a really long time. I appreciate you just sharing your own wisdom and experience with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun.